My name's Andrew McMillen. I'm a journalist. My first book was published in July. It's called Talking Smack, Honest Conversations About Drugs, and it features in-depth interviews with 14 prominent Australian musicians. One of my goals with the book was to change the tone of the national dialogue around drug use by moving this tricky topic closer to the spotlight, where it can be examined from all angles without fear, sensationalism, or stigma. While promoting the book, I was interviewed on national television on Channel 7's The Morning Show. Allow me to play a short clip for you.
It seems when it comes to music, getting high to get by has often been celebrated. So, is the age of experimentation back, or is it time for the come down?
For more, we're joined live in the studio by author Andrew McMillen, whose new book, Talking Smack, features interviews about drug use with some of Australia's most important musicians. Welcome, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew.
What made you want to do this project?
I'm a lifelong music fan, and for the last 5 years I've been a music journalist, but in the last couple of years after avoiding drugs most of my life, I turned 24 and worked up the courage to start trying some of these things for myself. I didn't die, I didn't have a bad time. In fact, I had a fantastic time using drugs like cannabis and MDMA. And I don't think there's any shame in saying that. It's just rare that we hear those kind of stories in public. So with the book, what I wanted to do was to talk to some of our best-known musicians about their honest, truthful experiences with drugs, illicit, legal, and prescription, to kind of put these stories out into the public and have them up for discussion, because I feel that for too long they've been kind of confined to the shadows. 2 days later, The Morning Show ran another segment on drug use, this time taking a rather different approach. The hosts began by wondering whether Australians have gone too far with our openness around drug use and whether we should make the topic more taboo. They invited John Rogerson, CEO of the Australian Drug Foundation, to discuss it further. Here's another short clip.
John, do you think our obsession with honesty has taken away the fear factor for people?
Look, first of all, congratulations to you guys for actually having a conversation about this, because we actually need a lot more honesty around this whole issue of illicit drugs. There's so many myths in our community around drugs, not just illegal drugs but also the legal drugs, that we actually need much more honest conversation so that we can actually help people deal with these issues much more constructively.
So clearly, in the space of 2 days, I had effected change on a national level. Thanks to my book and The Morning Show's influential daily viewership, the tone of the national dialogue around drug use flipped from demonisation and stigmatisation to compassion and understanding. The book has gone on to sell 100,000 copies, and the federal government at last realised its approach to the topic was all wrong, heralding a raft of radical policy changes, including the regulation and decriminalisation of illicit drugs of all types across the country. Rather than smoking a cigar after delivering important national economic policy, sources tell me that Treasurer Joe Hockey has instead taken to sparking up a joint. Wait a minute. I lost myself in fantasy for a moment there. None of what I just said is true. Hockey smokes cigars, not joints. Federal drug policy hasn't shifted an inch. My book has sold a fraction of 100,000 copies, and the only person who saw my appearance on The Morning Show was kind enough to email me within an hour of its broadcast. I will now read to you the first and only hate mail I've received about my book, written by a person named Jenna. I quote, "I recently watched your interview with The Morning Show, and I must say I am disgusted that anyone would write a book like this. I will admit I have not read your book, nor am I going to. I couldn't believe you sat there and happily said you enjoyed your experiences with illicit drugs. You were amazingly lucky that you didn't get addicted to these horrible substances. You were so goddamn lucky that nothing horrible happened to you, that you, your friends and family didn't suffer because of your stupidity. Most people aren't that fortunate. Not once did you talk about the negative effects of drug use. You did indeed write a book glorifying drugs, and you supported it with famous characters. Children and teenagers of this generation are so impressionable, and you've written this awful book. I hope the amount of criticism you get is enormous. I hope you realize that just because you didn't have a bad experience, a lot of people do. And you have in fact offended recovering addicts, recovering families that watch their children and siblings go through this awful time. You are an absolute disgust." Unquote. I read this email on my phone soon after leaving Channel 7 studios, between visits to Sydney bookstores to greet the teeming hordes clamouring for signed copies by the wheelbarrow. My first reaction to Jenna's email was one of complete lack of surprise. My second reaction was one of empathy. I knew exactly where Jenna was coming from. In fact, it wasn't so long ago that Jenna's views and my own were almost identical. I believe that the conversation surrounding drug use in modern Australia is a black and white battleground, bisected by stark pathways. The straight and narrow of alcohol, caffeine, nicotine and prescription medication, and the dark and crooked of cannabis, cocaine, ecstasy, heroin and methamphetamine. The message that's been cooked up and reinforced for decades by powerful societal figures, police, politicians, public health officials and much of the media is that you're a fine, upstanding citizen if you stick to the former path by purchasing these government-approved mood-altering substances. Conversely, if you seek out and consume anything in the latter category, you're a criminal, a loser, a bad person. I grew up in Bundaberg, Queensland, the second son of 2 primary school teachers. Through my adolescence, I trod the straight and narrow line uncritically. As far as I'd come to understand, illicit activity was associated with antisocial behaviour, drug trafficking, violence, crime. It was rare to hear any alternatives to these overpowering, fear-based messages. Films and TV shows, usually made in the United States, provided the only compelling, contradictory visual evidence. But these were fictionalized versions of reality. At an intellectual level, I could not entertain the possibility that illegal drugs had the potential to be fun, safe, life-affirming, non-habit forming, or all of the above. These sorts of stories are rarely told in our society. Like many Australian teenagers, I abused alcohol, a socially acceptable form of intoxication, on a consistent basis. A hangover is often greeted by your peers with a wink and a playful shake of the head, physical evidence of an apparently memorable night out. In 2007, at age 19, I extended one foot across to the dark and crooked path by smoking cannabis for the first time. I still upheld the old dichotomy in my mind, but now I was a student at a residential college attached to the University of Queensland and was feeling experimental, living proof of a classic quote from an early South Park episode centered upon drug education. There's a time and a place for everything, and it's called college. Smoking cannabis became an occasional, illicit thrill. It felt different to those years of boozing. It felt naughty. It made the mind somersault in strange and interesting ways. It attuned the ears to different frequencies, and which made music even more attractive than usual. Quite an achievement, as I've obsessed over music for as long as I can remember. For the first time in my life, I found myself dabbling with drugs and enjoying the company of the outsider types attracted to such behaviours. I drew the line at cannabis, though. It took another 5 years for me to work up the courage to cross it by trying anything harder or heavier than smoking a joint. In hindsight, this distinction feels absurdly abstract. What is the difference between smoking pot and swallowing MDMA, the psychoactive ingredient in ecstasy? One drug grows from the earth and the other is the product of chemical synthesis, sure. But both are illegal in the eyes of the law. Both are frowned upon by large sectors of the community. The mental leap required to use both substances appears so small as to be insignificant, yet for me, the chasm between the two was vast. In hindsight, I find it extraordinary that I avoided illicit drugs until the age of 19. I avoided them because I was scared shitless of what might happen. Put simply, I didn't know, so I stuck with what I did know: alcohol abuse. I recognize now that what was missing from my understanding of drug use was honesty. I didn't understand why a person would use cannabis or MDMA or LSD because this wasn't an easy conversation to have with anyone. This is something that I would like to change, and it's one of the reasons why I wrote Talking Smack. It's the kind of book I wish I read 10 years ago at the age of 16. I designed the book as a collection of stories starring public figures who are willing to discuss matters that are almost always kept private. Drug use is a society-wide issue, yet it's usually only the same handful of stakeholders who are willing to speak up. Most of the time, it's those on the critical side of the argument who speak loudest: police, politicians, public health officials, and sensationalist elements of the media. It's easy to generalize and demonize those who use illicit drugs. Western societies have been doing this for decades now. Yet, by tarring all of these people with the same brush, we tend to miss the diverse and nuanced reasons why people choose to use. Plainly, the illegality of drugs is not a significant deterrent. Prohibition has not worked because humans are clever when it comes to obtaining what they want. I thought about this every time I logged onto Silk Road, the anonymous online marketplace that catered to the tastes and needs of drug users throughout the world, myself included. The entire ecosystem of darknet markets are built on human nature and ingenuity, technology, trust, commerce, faith, and ultimately desire. The users get what they want in the mail, the vendors get paid in return. All completely illegal, of course, yet evidently, where there's a will, there's a way. Some people in this room are illicit drug users. Perhaps most people here are. This symposium is a great opportunity for like-minded people to get together and speak intelligently, rationally, and compassionately about this topic. It's great that you're here. It's great that we can have conversations about drug use together today, and hopefully long after we leave, we can take some of what we've learned here and share it with others. But I believe that with our knowledge comes great responsibility. I feel this acutely, having written a book that discusses drug use frankly, and having admitted to my own drug experiences both on the page and on national television. If anything, writing and publishing Talking Smack has made me more cautious and serious about these issues, as now that I'm something of a public figure when it comes to speaking honestly about drug use, I have every intention of living a long, healthy and productive life while also partaking in the occasional recreational use of illicit drugs, just as I occasionally drink alcohol and, like our treasurer, smoke the odd cigar. I want to implant this idea in your mind here at the beginning of EGA 2014. As drug users, we have a responsibility to behave, think, and speak intelligently about something that is often associated with the lower end of culture. Think about how often media reports describe someone as, quote, turning to drugs, or, quote, falling into a spiral of drug use, as if the only reason that people ever choose to use illicit drugs is to escape their terrible, desperate lives. Everyone in this room knows that to be untrue. We know that illicit drugs can induce some of the most incredible, indescribable, life-affirming states that the human mind can conjure. But people outside of this room don't necessarily know that. I know I didn't. Neither do people like my morning show pen pal, Jenna. It's up to people like you and I to communicate with honesty and candor about the full spectrum of possibilities when it comes to drug use. As with any risk-taking behaviour, there's always the potential for negative outcomes while under the influence. These risks can be minimized through safe, responsible consumption in supportive environments. Those three adjectives, safe, responsible, supportive, they're generally associated with experienced users, which is why it's incumbent upon those who have successfully experimented with illicit drugs to tell the truth about these matters and to educate their peers, the next generation. After all, ours is a fringe community, a minority, and if we desire greater acceptance within society, I believe that road is paved with honesty. Something that the singer and songwriter Paul Kelly said to me during our interview for Paul Kelly has stuck with me as my attitude towards drugs continues to evolve. If you don't respect them, he said, they won't respect you. These are powerful psychoactive substances that we're talking about, after all. They can affect our perception of the world around us, as well as our moods, egos, and how we interact with our peers. They can boost our creativity and our ability to articulate our thoughts, or they can seriously impair both of those outlets. Whether you're a dedicated psychonaut or an occasional stoner, we could all benefit from learning how to better explain our choices and behaviours. It's not so much about normalising these activities as it is about educating those who don't understand, often through no fault of their own. While criminalisation remains a threat to any illicit drug user, this will be difficult, but it's not impossible. It's not a crime to talk about drugs in public. It's not a crime to tell the truth. As for myself, not a single word of Talking Smack was written while I was under the influence of anything stronger than caffeine. I believe in barriers between work and recreation. I believe that the decision to use illicit drugs should not be made lightly or spontaneously. I believe in forethought when it comes to set and setting. I believe in measuring doses. I believe in researching the effects of psychoactive drugs long before you put them inside your body. I believe in using drugs to enhance experiences shared with friends and loved ones. I believe in buying from reputable vendors who sell quality products. I believe in the use of safe drug testing kits. I believe in moderation. Above all, I believe that drug use is a subject that demands honesty, respect, empathy, and compassion. It has been confined to the shadows and fringes out of fear, shame, stigma, and embarrassment for too long. Together, we can change this. I hope you guys have a great day. I encourage you to continue thinking, reading, and most importantly, talking about this subject with those closest to you. As far as I'm concerned, the more honest conversations about drugs that take place, the better. Thanks for listening.
It must have taken incredible courage to hop on national television and do what you did. So what was the journey leading up to that? I mean, was it publishing the book and then sort of going on the road for it, or were you invited?
Yeah, funnily enough, that was actually my first public interview about the book with anyone. So kind of like a baptism of fire, getting dumped into, hundreds of thousands of viewers around the country, talking about using cannabis and MDMA, honestly. But like, you say courage, and maybe that's true, but for me it just felt natural. Like, maybe it's a different generational thing, but having had those experiences of coming across from fearing drugs to understanding and accepting that they're a part of life, just a part of life, maybe a small fraction of life for many people, I don't think it's such a big deal.
Seem to have echoes of coming out in a way, and I wonder if we have anything to learn or to take from other marginalised or non-mainstream groups that have made those breaks forward over the last 15, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, I think this is true, you guys may disagree, but illicit drug users, we're a minority. Like, it's a small, quite a few people around Australia might have tried illicit drugs, but few consume them on a regular basis. So we're a minority, but it's a part of life for people, and I think we should be able to talk freely about it. Maybe not to a policeman or a policewoman, but it's just part of life, and if it's handled well, it can be a successful part of life.
And do you feel that the musos you spoke to are in many ways regarded as role models, and I guess many, maybe parents might like them to be role models, but in many cases they're different kinds of role models for us. So how do you feel they felt about their responsibility as role models in a way, or did you feel that they were really just sort of sitting having a chat and they didn't feel any sense of responsibility given their public profile?
Well, it's funny, Paul Kelly, who's the headliner on my book, as it were, he admitted to his heroin use on 7:30 Report 4 years ago when his book came out. And of the 22-minute interview, Kerry O'Brien grilled him for about 5 minutes straight on his recreational use of heroin. And he concluded that line of questioning with, Paul, you're a role model for so many people. Like, what do you think your fans are going to say about this? And he kind of deferred. He said, you know what, if you're looking to rock stars as role models, maybe you should be, get your head checked sort of thing. Because we're just people who like making music. Like, we're just part of the community. We shouldn't, although we are held up on a pedestal by some people, we're just average people, as it is.
That's exactly right. So musos aren't elected, are they? They don't stand on a platform and say, here, I'm going to be your role model. So anyway, thank you very much. That was a fantastic, stimulating talk and a great way to start the day. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.